Most Azure File Sync environments today are quietly rotting under the surface, still running on expired security models, and nobody's talking about it. The reason? It still syncs. The files move, the dashboards stay green, and the admins congratulate themselves for maintaining stability. Meanwhile, the authentication layer holding that whole operation together is held together by string and nostalgia. Here's the thing. Azure File Sync was secure enough 10 years ago. Back then, Azure didn't have managed identities, and certificates and shared access keys were about the only trick in the book for proving who's who. But we are no longer in that era, and the bad guys have noticed that your neatly organized file synchronization setup can be hijacked by anyone with the right piece of leaked data. A shared key or expired certificate doesn't care who's holding it. It just opens when presented. That's not identity, that's superstition. Yet administrators cling to it, lulled by the fact their dashboards haven't exploded. Yet, yes, by all means, let's secure a hybrid cloud link using 199's authentication practices. Let's pretend that static keys are a modern concept, that renewal scripts equal automation, and that the cloud magically forgives bad habits. It doesn't. Every certificate you babysit and every SaaS key you rotate is an unguarded door someone else can walk through if you're unlucky. So here's what we're going to do. Dissect this antique authentication setup, expose how it sabotages your security posture, show why managed identities solve it permanently, and then walk through the migration path before your audit or attacker forces your hand. By the end, you'll know exactly how to dismantle your ticking sync bomb and replace it with authentication that belongs in this century. Why the legacy Azure File Sync model is a trap. Let's start with what you've actually built. Azure File Sync has three main actors: the storage sync service sitting in Azure, a cloud endpoint that's your Azure file share, and multiple server endpoints, Windows servers scattered across your data centers or clouds that keep local copies of files in sync. Its elegant architecture built on a tragically outdated handshake. Each time those components talk, they use two primitive authentication types. The server endpoints prove themselves to the sync service using certificates, yes, actual X, 509 files generated and stored locally. Then the sync service and servers talk to the Azure file share using shared access signatures or SAS tokens, which are basically glorified passwords embedded in URLs. Back when Azure was young, this made sense. There was no Entra ID integration for backend services, no way to assign a dynamic identity to a process. Certificates and SAS tokens were necessary evils, a temporary patch to make cross-cloud communication possible. But temporary became permanent the moment administrators accepted certificate renewal as a routine life process instead of a design flaw. The problem is not just that these secrets expire, it's that they exist as transferable objects. Nothing binds them to a particular machine or application. Anyone or anything with possession of that file or token can impersonate your legitimate server. Think of a SAS key as the master key to your office building. It doesn't check fingerprints. Whoever has it can stroll straight into the CEO's office and start photocopying documents. And when administrators copy those keys into scripts, store them in secured shares, or accidentally log them in plaintext backups, they become artifacts scattered across the network like breadcrumbs for attackers. Operationally, this model is exhausting. 6 separate URLs must be allowed through firewalls just for certificate handling. Certificates must be renewed, rotated, and traced across servers that sometimes no longer exist. There are scripts for renewals, alerts for expirations, and endless validation steps. It's a small bureaucracy of fragile tasks, all maintaining a system pretending to be secure through ritual rather than reality. The astonishing part? Many admins defend it. They treat certificate renewal ceremonies as best practice, blissfully unaware they're propping up a sandcastle against a digital tide. The logic goes, if it hasn't been hacked yet, it must be fine. No, it's not fine, it's merely untested. Each synced file is another vote of confidence in an authentication model designed before zero trust was even a phrase. This legacy approach is a trap precisely because it hides instability behind apparent functionality. Everything works until the day one SS token leaks or one certificate renewal fails, and the whole synchronized world grinds to a compromised halt. You're not maintaining best practice. You're maintaining a liability disguised as uptime. The security fallout, but it still works syndrome. There's a fascinating psychological flaw in IT administration known as security inertia. It's the quiet refusal to fix something because from the outside, nothing appears broken. The sync is up, the jobs succeed, and the last ticket about certificate renewal was 3 months ago. So why change anything? Every lazy configuration in history has been justified by those 3 words: it still works. This is the logic that turns temporary workarounds into permanent infrastructure. You tell yourself you'll migrate later, after the quarter ends, after the budget cycle, after you retire, whenever later arrives with no immediate risk. Congratulations, you just created a time bomb with quarterly reporting. Every key, every certificate, every unattended secret renewal job, each one is a countdown timer quietly ticking toward failure or exposure. Security debt behaves exactly like financial debt: small, invisible interest that multiplies while you sleep. The older your system, the higher the interest rate. And with certificates and SAS tokens, the interest compounds every time someone copies a key into a PowerShell script or stores a certificate backup in an admin tools folder with everyone. Read access. File sync doesn't need to break outright. All it takes is one stale export to cross the wrong boundary. Consider a real-world scenario. A company keeps its Azure File Sync untouched for years. The SAS token that authenticates to their file share is periodically printed in backup logs by a verbose script. Nobody notices because the logs are internal. Then one day, an intern clones that Git repo to test something, and the logs travel with it. A curious tester discovers a line that looks like gibberish but validates beautifully as a SAS token. 10 minutes later, that token is placed into an Azure Storage Explorer and the entire cloud share starts silently replicating to a rogue endpoint. No alarms, no noise, just unauthorized access through perfectly valid credentials, because to the system, the gate opened with the right key. It never asked who held it. And that's the absurdity. The old model doesn't know who. It only knows that you presented a valid certificate, that you included a proper key. There's no notion of identity, no policy enforcement, no conditional access logic that can say this server isn't supposed to be here. Modern Azure security principles, passwordless authentication, managed tokens, just-in-time access are built on dynamic trust evaluation. The legacy sync model is built on blind acceptance. It assumes all secrets are equal and forever trustworthy once provisioned. Attack vectors blossom in that assumption. Shared access signatures can be reused across tenants or subscriptions if not isolated correctly. They survive backups, they cross environments, they don't expire unless explicitly rotated. Certificates have man-in-the-middle potential during renewal or misconfiguration. Even the validation URLs, those 6 endpoints you opened through the firewall, represent potential surfaces to probe. And when the inevitable breach occurs, the impact isn't abstract. A stolen SAS token isn't a hypothetical risk, it's a compliance nightmare. You've effectively enabled cross-tenant data exfiltration using your own credentials. Legal departments get involved. Regulatory reporting eats weeks of productivity. Financial penalties follow. The downtime, the forensic auditing, the reputational cleanup, none of that is cheap. Your operational continuity may temporarily survive, but your organization's credibility does not. The tragic comedy, half the time, during post-incident reviews, someone mutters, "Well, it still worked fine yesterday." Exactly, that's the problem. Legacy authentication doesn't fail loudly, it fails invisibly, and it keeps failing right up until enforcement catches you. The "but it still works" defense translates to "we haven't been caught yet," and that's not strategy, it's gambling. The solution isn't to rotate faster or monitor harder, it's to stop carrying the debt. Enter managed identities. The adult supervision your file sync has been missing. Enter managed identities, the grown-up way to authenticate. A managed identity, or MI if you prefer acronyms over common sense, is what happens when Azure learns to vouch for its own resources. Instead of you babysitting secrets, Azure assigns an automatically generated Entra ID identity to the resource itself. The resource becomes a recognized citizen of your directory, authenticated, auditable, and crucially temporary in its credentials. In normal people's terms, each server gets its own passport, issued and verified by Azure, impossible to counterfeit, impossible to lend to a friend. There are 2 flavors of managed identity. A system-assigned identity is born with its host. It lives and dies with that virtual machine or Arc-connected server. A user-assigned identity floats independently, reusable across multiple resources if you prefer to manage access centrally. Both behave like proper users in Entra ID, except they never forget their passwords, never share them, and never leave them in script comments. Managed identity replaces both legs of the old sync authentication dance. First, the relationship between your server endpoint and the storage sync service, previously handled by local certificates, is now governed by Entra-issued tokens. Second, the link from storage sync service and endpoints to the Azure file share itself, once guarded by fragile SAS tokens, is also handled through MI-based, dynamically issued credentials. The servers stop pretending with certificates. They start talking like authenticated peers inside Azure's control plane. Tokens last minutes, not years. They renew automatically and revoke effortlessly. If you remove a server or disable its identity, it stops existing to the ecosystem instantly. No manual cleanup, no legacy thumbprints floating around. Picture every authentication event as a short-lived conversation instead of an eternal handshake. Each side verifies the other using live, cryptographically issued trust. No stored objects, no shared anything. That's the dream zero trust model, authorization based on proof of identity, not possession of artifacts. Now observe the housekeeping benefits. You don't have to whitelist any certificate handling URLs just to make synchronization work. You don't have to store private keys in PFX files or worry about expiration schedules. Everything you hated about the old model, those hand-maintained scripts, the alerts, the renewals, evaporates. Managed identity is Azure's way of saying, stop holding the flashlight, we've installed streetlights. From a security architecture standpoint, the shift is rational and overdue. Tokens issued by Entra are scoped, auditable, and time-limited. Revoking access is a policy change, not a data hunt. When a system-assigned identity requests a token, it does so through Azure Resource Manager, which validates its existence, its resource ID, and its right to act. That process happens within the cloud control plane itself. It never trusts local storage. So even if someone cloned the VM, they'd clone a resource without a valid identity. The keys quite literally don't transfer. And yes, you can apply your favorite paranoia layers, conditional access, logging, and role-based access control. Managed identity sits comfortably within Entra ID, meaning you can chart access events in the same console that audits users and admins. Uniform visibility, finally. Operationally, managed identity also kills the ancient ritual of manual credential rotation. Need to replace something? Delete the identity, recreate it, reassign permissions. Done. Azure handles expiration windows automatically, issuing fresh tokens on demand. This is what competent automation looks like. Simplification through immutability. Compare that to your current method. Patchwork scripts, time-stamped backups of certificates, SNS alerts for renewal reminders, and manual firewall validation. It's the difference between a self-driving car and a wagon requiring monthly wheel reattachment. The MI route doesn't just improve security, it restores sanity. And, because I know you're thinking it, no, there's no functional downgrade. File sync operates exactly as before, only the authentication model changes. In fact, new storage sync services are created with managed identity by default. The holdouts are legacy deployments built before MI integration existed. Azure is basically saying, if you're still using certificates in 2025, you're telling on yourself. The real appeal is policy unification. Once every file sync component, a storage sync service and its registered servers, uses MI, the entire chain falls inside Entra ID governance. RBAC becomes consistent, conditional access rules apply uniformly. You get event logging, lifecycle control, and instant revocation without sifting through thumbprints. So what do you lose besides insomnia? Static credentials, manual patches, and long weekends spent testing renewal scripts. What you gain is integrity by design. Each component proves itself with fresh, trusted, verifiable credentials. No possession-based guessing, no please trust this blob. Azure enforces who can talk to what through living tokens rather than dusty certificates. That's the what. Next comes the part everyone fears, the how. Because if certs and SAS keys are your lingering security debt, the migration path is your debt consolidation plan. The good news, it's not nearly as painful as you think. The bad news, you'll have no excuse left to postpone it once you see how straightforward it is. The migration playbook, turning off the time bomb. Here's where theory meets reality. You've decided you're done babysitting certificates like a digital nanny. Good, now let's disarm this thing before it explodes. Migrating Azure File Sync to managed identities isn't heroic work. It's housekeeping. And yet, most admins treat it like a heart transplant. It's not. It's more like replacing the batteries in a smoke detector before the fire starts. Step 1, know your version if your Azure File Sync agent isn't at least version 20. Stop here. Updating the agent is non-negotiable. Older builds simply don't speak the managed identity language. Think of 20 as the border checkpoint where the old certificate passport gets confiscated and the new biometric one issued. Updating every registered server ensures the environment is fluent in token-based trust before you flip the switch. Now divide your servers into 2 tribes. Tribe 1, Azure VMs. Tribe 2, everyone else, servers on premises or stranded in other clouds. Tribe 1 gets the easy route. For any Azure VM, you just enable a system-assigned managed identity directly from the VM's identity blade. Click on Save, and that VM instantly receives its own Entra identity. No downloads, no scripts, no messy key stores. You've just given that machine a birth certificate issued by Azure itself. Tribe 2, the non-Azure servers, need a bridge into Azure's control plane. Enter Azure Arc. If you've never touched Arc, it's Microsoft's quiet masterpiece, a way to extend Azure Resource Manager down into foreign territory. In practical terms, Arc lets you take a crusty on-prem Windows server and make it behave like a first-class Azure citizen. By connecting a server through Azure Arc, you grant it visibility, governance, and, you guessed it, the ability to receive a managed identity. So your homework for non-Azure machines looks like this sequence. Deploy the Azure Arc agent, register the server in Azure, enable the system-assigned managed identity, and optionally install the File Sync extension through Arc while you're there. That extension isn't mandatory if the agent's already running, but it streamlines lifecycle control later. Congratulations, you've now stretched Azure's identity fabric around hardware that was born outside it. Once every server is identity-enabled, the real magic happens inside the storage sync service. You'll open its configuration and toggle the switch for managed identity authentication. That simple action triggers an audit behind the scenes. Azure inspects every registered server, checks which ones have valid managed identities, and flags any laggards. Mixed mode technically works, some servers on certs, others on MI, but mixed mode is like dieting while eating cake. It defeats the purpose. Finish enabling identities before you continue. When you confirm the switch, Azure automatically provisions the required permissions through role-based access control. The storage sync service's own system-assigned identity gains storage account contributor, while every registered server's identity gains storage file data SMB share contributor. Translation: the service can manage, the servers can synchronize. You no longer assign keys or distribute roles by hand. Azure does the delegation through policy, not pity. Each identity receives the exact privileges needed, nothing more. That's least privilege by default, not by wishful documentation. Now, there are potential bumps because Microsoft assumes someone will inevitably move things they shouldn't. If you migrate the storage sync service or file share to a different subscription or resource group, expect your RBAC bindings to vanish. They're scoped per container, so you'll need to re-establish them. Azure's engineers kindly provided PowerShell CMDlets for this, set as a storage sync cloud endpoint permi SSIN for cloud endpoints and set as a storage sync server endpoint permission for server endpoints. Run them in verbose mode. They'll narrate every reassignment so you can confirm nothing silently failed. It's the difference between knowing the surgery succeeded and hoping the patient's still breathing. Other contingencies fall under user error cleanup. Delete an identity, re-enable it and reapply its role. Break and enter app link, recreate it and rerun the permission templates. You can't brick the system by experimenting. Worst case, you reissue tokens. So that's the beauty of dynamic authentication. It forgives reversible stupidity. Once all the pieces lock in, the transformation is dramatic. The nightmare choreography of certificates, SAS tokens, and whitelisted URLs simply disappears. Server registration becomes self-validating. Secrets regenerate internally. Firewalls relax because you've eliminated 6 redundant endpoints used only for certificate validation. Your entire sync operation transitions from a fragile web of human maintenance to a self-healing identity mesh under Azure's governance. Operationally, the first thing you'll notice is silence. No more rotation reminders, no expiring cert emails, no panicked tickets during renewal week. Synchronization just works, and every transaction leaves an auditable Entra ID footprint. That's not magic, it's mathematics enforced by architecture. So yes, the process takes an afternoon, maybe a day, if your fleet is large, but afterward you've effectively defused the bomb. The wires are clipped, the ticking stops, and the system now regenerates its own defenses on schedule without you lifting a finger. What used to be an administrative soap opera becomes a self-contained organism. Servers prove their existence through live identity, Azure validates instantly, and everything that follows is cryptographically verified. That's what modern security looks like. Less maintenance, more certainty. You didn't patch the old design. You replaced it with one that can't decay. And once you witness that simplicity, you'll never tolerate keys and certificates again. The time bomb isn't just neutralized, it's turned into a metronome, keeping rhythm for an environment finally running on time. After the switch, security that actually scales. Once the managed identity lights flick on across your deployment, the first thing you'll feel is the absence of noise. The sync still runs, but the usual chaos, the certificates queued for renewal, the SAS tokens buried in scripts, has vanished. It's eerie at first, like walking into a server room after moving all the racks to the cloud. The hum is gone because the headaches are gone. This is security that scales because it ceases to depend on individual diligence. Managed identities don't need you to remember, schedule, or rotate anything. Tokens are issued on demand by Entra ID, scoped to seconds, expired by the time you refill your coffee. Every access interaction now leaves a standardized queryable footprint in your audit logs. Until now, you had to piece together a trail of thumbprints, certificates, and tokens with expiration dates like lottery numbers. Now you can open Microsoft Entra's audit blade and see every operation attributed to an identity that actually belongs to something real. Your defined servers, not phantom scripts. Key-based authentication was always flat. It granted access everywhere equally and forever until someone manually revoked it. Managed identity makes permission vertical, narrow, temporary, verifiable. The result is reduced attack surface without reducing speed. You're no longer handing out skeleton keys, you're issuing single-use hotel keycards. In security terms, that's not just progress, that's evolution. For your compliance teams, this change is borderline intoxicating. No more explaining why static keys exist, no more spreadsheets listing certificates and their locations. You can prove least privilege simply by exporting the role assignments. Proof of governance moves from PDF to platform. Audit weeks shrink into hours. Operationally, you'll realize you've stopped micromanaging the plumbing. Network whitelists are cleaner, those 6 certificate validation endpoints can finally be retired. Fewer open URLs mean fewer attack vectors. And because authorization now happens entirely through Entra ID's control plane, policies like conditional access or MFA enforcement, even for service operations, work natively. Your security model becomes consistent, finally living under a single authority instead of stitched between legacy systems and human mythology. Think of the old setup as a series of bandages layered over the same wound. Each renewal just added another adhesive. Managed identity heals the tissue beneath. Credentials aren't stored, rotated, or trusted blindly. They're generated, validated, and disposed of. It's regenerative security, self-repairing, self-verifying, self-limiting. Even your operational dashboards will simplify. Instead of sifting logs across Azure Storage, Event Hub, and local server registries, every event eligible for compliance inspection now flows through a single observable pipeline. You gain centralized visibility. And the side effect? Faster troubleshooting. If a sync fails, you check identity permissions, not certificate thumbprints buried in some registry hive. Organizations resisting this shift usually cite inertia. We already automated certificate renewal. Congratulations, you automated a bad idea. Automation doesn't convert an obsolete model into a secure one. Keeping SAS tokens because it's easier is like insisting on carrying cash because you memorized your wallet layout. Modernization means embracing structural solutions, not polishing vintage problems. So after the switch, your posture isn't just safer, it's scalable. Every new server onboarded through Azure Arc automatically receives a managed identity, inherits RBAC via policy, and starts syncing without any secret distribution. It's deployment by design, not deployment by ritual. Each component authenticates dynamically, and when someone decommissions it, Azure retracts its identity instantly. The circle closes neatly, no forgotten keys jingle in the background. If before you were juggling plates, now the table rotates itself. That's the level of automation security professionals aim for. Nothing more to babysit, nothing left to leak. And because audits, compliance, and access control now come from the same identity source, scaling means multiplying trust, not complexity. When people say security that scales, this is what they should mean. The more you add, the stronger the system gets at the only sensible move. Continuing to run Azure File Sync on certificates and SAS tokens is the technology equivalent of driving with expired brakes. You'll still stop eventually, but probably against something expensive. The illusion of control relies on the fact that bad decisions take time to punish you. Managed identity removes that waiting period by embedding accountability into the system itself. It's not optional modernization, it's overdue maintenance. Every moment you stay on the legacy model, you're accruing risk interest. Each certificate renewal is another payment toward a debt that never decreases. Migration, by contrast, is a one-time settlement. Update the sync agent, enable managed identity, Arc enable the on-prem servers, validate permissions, and close the ledger for good. The whole procedure costs less effort than your last patch cycle and ends with infinite payoff. No more manual credential babysitting, no creeping exposure. And yes, resistance persists. Some will argue they've hardened their certificate storage or secured their token files. That's like padlocking a shoebox inside a bank vault while leaving the bank doors open. Managed identity doesn't secure secrets. It erases them. There's nothing to steal because there's nothing static to find. So here's the final reality check. Migration to managed identity isn't merely compliance brownie points, it's survival. As Azure evolves, identity becomes the only currency it accepts. You can upgrade by choice now, or you can upgrade later under audit pressure or after an incident report forces your hand. Either way, the move is inevitable. Do it deliberately. Modernize, document, and walk away knowing your synchronization layer finally authenticates with adult credentials. Entropy wins unless you choose structure. Subscribing is structure. Press follow and convert curiosity into a reliable signal.